But I did want to get to this story. I did want to get to this story. This is the top story, obviously. Well, what else is there to talk about, folks, but the war in Ukraine? It has pretty much dominated our media and our culture for the last few weeks now. The war in Ukraine now. If you've listened to this show with me and the Rev, you already know how I feel about it. I think that ultimately I do not support imperialism in any form. I do not agree with what Vladimir Putin has done in terms of invading Ukraine, especially the full country. But at the same time, I do think that on some level, he is reacting to the policy of United the United States and NATO, who over the past 30 years have continuously encroached on NATO, on Russia, the country of Russia, even when they promised not to. You see, there was a deal made when the Berlin Wall failed and Germany reunified, East and West Germany unified, that there would not be NATO countries eastward towards Russia, that they would stop bringing countries into the fold from Eastern Europe. You know, because Russia, from its perspective, said, well, we had the Warsaw Pact to protect us. You guys have NATO to protect you. Just leave the Warsaw Pact countries alone. Leave Eastern Europe alone. We'll dissolve the Warsaw Pact. Everything is good. Everything's gravy. But the U.S. and Western powers have not done that. And it's not like that they haven't been warned. They have been warned. A few weeks ago, we talked about the great American ambassador George Kennan, who actually, in 1997, wrote, well, let me just say this. He was the ambassador to the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And he wrote in 1997 that NATO expanding eastward would be the biggest mistake that the United States and the Western countries ever made. He said it would be the foreign policy blunder of the 21st century, and here we are. Here we are. He said that basically a Russian leader would come into power and see the humiliation of having NATO encroach closer and closer to Russia, and would take that as a declaration of war. The disrespect. And it's not like Vladimir Putin hasn't said this. When George W. Bush was in power in 2007, he said something about it. In 2013, when Obama was president, and the United States literally overthrew Ukraine's government, helped overthrow its government, helped neo-Nazis, armed neo-Nazis. The irony of a black president helping to fund neo-Nazi armed groups in 2013, the Azov Battalion, look at those guys. I mean, look them up. They are a hell of a group. Their symbols are even close to Nazi symbols. You can see pictures of the battalion taking pictures with the NATO flag, the Ukrainian flag, and the Nazi flag, the literal Nazi flag this time. So there's no denying that there are definitely close ties with neo-Nazis, nationalists, and Ukraine's government. Now, there are bad people in every military, even ours, okay? The United States has plenty of gangbangers, former gangbangers, Klan members, and everything else in our military. They always have. Okay, that's not new. But what you generally don't have is whole wings of the army that celebrate neo-Nazi behavior and are basically modeling themselves after Nazis and right-wing nationalism. It'd be like if there was a whole wing of our army that used KKK symbols and had a ton of members from the Ku Klux Klan in it. It's that equivalent. And so, of course, the corporate media, the same media that wants you to care about Joe Rogan, using the N-word in a context that shouldn't be offensive, or want you to care about Dave Chappelle, or want you to be offended by this, that, and the other, by mean tweets or whatever. These people who claim that they care so much about white supremacy and racism, these people now have put themselves in a position. They put themselves in a position where they actually are supporting, or at least downplaying, the white nationalists, the right-wing elements of Ukraine's military and the Ukraine war as a whole, which is just them being, once again, dishonest. But for me personally, this entire conflict has become a mask-off moment for a lot of people. Not just in the press, but in our society, in our culture. A lot of these people who want to roll out the red carpet for Ukrainian refugees are the same ones when African refugees and when Middle Eastern refugees have begged for shelter from wars that the U.S. and other NATO countries, Western imperialist countries, have started. These people get the cold shoulder or get treated as if they are criminals themselves. But when it's blonde-haired, blue-eyed refugees, now they have sympathy. Now, a lot of what I've seen, I definitely wanted to talk about this last week. We didn't get to it. But you actually had a situation where you've had people in the media who've been caught saying all kinds of horribly racist things. All kinds of horribly racist things in defending their treatment of Ukrainians versus African and Middle Eastern refugees. Like a CBS foreign correspondent, Charlie DeGatta, he has received blowback for describing Ukraine as a relatively civilized country. This is what he had to say.
Now with the Russians marching in, it's changed the calculus entirely. Tens of thousands of people have tried to flee the city. There will be many more. People are hiding out in bomb shelters. But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen. So it's partly human nature, but they are not in denial.
Now, even he understood before he said it. That's why he couched what he said, and I'm going to have to be careful. He knew what he was saying was racist. He understood while he was saying it that what he was saying was heavily racially charged. And I don't know what the hell he's talking about, considering that Europe has had 2 world wars in the past century that killed 100 million people, including millions of Ukrainians. The Soviet Union, Russia lost 30 million people. But yes, wars only happen in Africa. Let's not forget about Yugoslavia, how NATO bombed Yugoslavia in the 90s. Yugoslavia ain't in Europe now? Come on. But it's not just here. In the BBC, you actually had Ukraine's deputy chief prosecutor give us this gem.
Me, I'm sorry. It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles and his helicopters and his rockets.
And so, of course, I understand and respect the emotion. What you are outlining there is this tension between longer-term efforts to apply pressure to Vladimir Putin, such as financial sanctions, and the very immediate military threat which you're experiencing.
Yeah, so as you see, he says it's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed. Blue eyes and blonde hair being killed. Wow. Tell us how you really feel, David. Let me get to this caller really quick. Hello, caller.
Hello, Scott. Once again, enjoying the show. You're hitting the nail on the head. You know, this prism of racism, where they view war. And I'm glad you were pointing on the I wouldn't call it infestation because they're part of the government and the military, the neo-Nazis in Ukraine.
Right.
It is amazing to me that people are ignoring the fact that we're arming neo-Nazis, and here's the end game. As I studied the geopolitics of it all, historically, you know, like you said, NATO was not supposed to expand east of Germany, but also the United States has used the neo-Nazis in Ukraine as useful idiots because now Germany has broken off their agreement to run a gas pipeline from the Russian Federation, the Soviet Union, through Germany, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because they invaded the Ukraine. So in essence, I think the United States really are using Ukrainians for their own geopolitical interests, of course, to kind of be a frustration point to the Russian Federation. And so, as you see it, and rightfully so, the United States is not engaging officially in the military sort of operations, and they've let it be known that boots on the ground is really not an option. And like I say, this is. But what really hurts me, Scott, is to look at to listen to good people who were just misinformed about history and how geopolitics work, and they don't. These people I'm referring to, they don't support Nazism,
right,
or support white supremacy. But unfortunately, if they're bombarded with this propaganda by this the war industrial complex partner, and I'm talking about corporate media,
yep,
then they get a different picture painted, a different worldview. And let me just say this. You have to look at the United States. I want to say not from a domestic point of view. You have to look at it as another country in terms of being an analyst, in order for you to kind of see through the propaganda of this war machine. And it's unfortunate that a lot of Americans are falling for this media propaganda brainstorm, but that's what it is. And like I said, I want to thank you and Dale for being independent media, doing the research,
yep,
and putting it plain. Well, thanks a lot. I'm enjoying the show.
It's all good, brother. It's all